Eleanor felt the very real fear of the blank page. She wasn't a writer or a journalist, yet a new life and a new live-in job were about to begin the next day. Her new employer was a wealthy, influential businessman who clearly had no idea of his own fortune. Without any pleasantries, he immediately laid out the terms over the phone. "I need a carer with a degree in psychotherapy to be with my daughter 24 hours a day. I have a well-appointed country house with excellent living conditions. You will have every comfort, but for the 3-month probationary period, you will not have a single day off. The generous salary will compensate you for all these temporary inconveniences." The man, who introduced himself as Mr. Barrington, named a sum so large that Eleanor's knees gave way. Her monthly income would be the equivalent of her yearly earnings at the hospital, including all bonuses and overtime. They agreed that she would start in 3 days. This would give her time to pack her personal belongings and gather the necessary medical equipment for her patient. Later, she would be given the right to make a list of anything else she might need. "The car will pick you up at your doorstep at exactly 8 in the morning. The driver's name is Simon. Please send me your home address on this number." Mr. Barrington's words were sharp and clear, as if he were minting coins. Eleanor even thought that every minute of this man's time was likely worth a fortune. His approach was so businesslike. This impressed her. She didn't respect fluff and idleness in conversation, and she judged people by their actions, not their honeyed words. At 26, she knew for a fact that time put everything in its place and stamped people with their true worth. And then there was Eleanor herself, a psychotherapist with a first-class degree, the pride of her department and the hope of her faculty. In school, all her flighty friends spent their time at discos and bars, but she had studied hard. A place in medical school on a bursary was only partially guaranteed by a golden medal. Excellent marks on her final exams would also be a major help. Her parents, her father, a plumber, and her mother, a sales assistant at a bakery, did not have the money for a serious education. It wasn't that they were bad people. Her father only drank on holidays and didn't have that bad habit of wetting his whistle with his colleagues after every payday. He was a refugee from a distant abandoned village and came to the city when all the rural farms in his homeland were bought up by entrepreneurs under a new farming regime. A holding company had appeared there with new format milk and meat processing plants and the most innovative technological lines. Michael had been invited to work there, but he held a grudge against the new owners. They had all but uprooted the grounds where his parents were buried at the edge of the old village, and they had razed the village to the ground. For him, it was an archaeological site of their former life. But deep down, he knew it was for the best. The villagers had been drinking themselves to death, and everyone was moving to the city anyway. Only he and his wife, Lucy, had held on to their small house and 10 acres of land, but eventually they gave up too. Eleanor was 14 at the time, and that's how she became a city girl. With the money from the sale of their land and home, they bought a 2-bedroom flat in a 5-story brick building. It was sturdy and would last a long time. Michael was welcomed with open arms at a factory. The salary wasn't much, but their family got by. Lucy quickly made friends with the neighbor ladies, who told her there was a spot at the bakery after the old sales assistant retired. The hard-working Lucy was welcomed and treated well. Their happiness ended in an instant. Michael was picking Lucy up from the bakery in their old Austin Mini when a clumsy bread van, awkwardly trying to turn in the yard, ran over the car without even noticing what had happened. Fate. The driver and the passenger were killed instantly. Eleanor's city life began with her becoming an orphan. Before the accident, Eleanor had loved school and books. She especially devoured books about human relationships, finding it fascinating to see how characters would act when put under pressure or forced into difficult situations. In the orphanage where she went after the tragedy, she was initially heartbroken, but she then sublimated her grief into her studies, so she wouldn't have to think about her lost parents. After 6 months, she was taken in by foster parents, but she never developed a warm, loving relationship with them. She moved into their 2-bedroom council flat, which was better than the orphanage, where everyone, even as teenagers, dreamed of a family. But she was dreaming of growing up and living alone. A naive and touching young woman, Eleanor tried to assess people's behavior and guess how they would act based on their character. She was a self-taught psychologist, and she especially loved thinking that people could be changed, their behavior modified, and their beliefs altered. In her final year, Eleanor spent all her time at the public library, devouring Freud, Jung, and countless others. Her classmates didn't even know such names. She earned her top marks from school the hard way, sitting for days and nights hunched over books. Her hard work wasn't the result of gifts or bribes to teachers. No one could afford to pay them. She was a talented student, and her high marks were genuinely and generously given. Her peers had long since given up on her as a weirdo, though she was very beautiful. Eleanor was breathtakingly beautiful, possessing that rare feminine magic that turns men into devoted admirers and slaves at first sight. Her ripe wheat-colored hair fell in waves down her straight back. Her green, languid eyes with their dark pupils invited one to drown in their depth. Her full figure evoked sensuality, while her delicate wrists and ankles hinted at a certain aristocratic charm. Nature had not held back on her looks, but Eleanor herself seemed oblivious to it all, diligently studying and ignoring the longing glances of men of all ages. After graduating, as an orphan with a medal, she was pitied at the medical university. "The girl has had such a dramatic life," they said. "We can make an exception and find her a place with a bursary." She passed the entrance exam with flying colors, without any tutors or financial investment. She moved back to her parents' flat, which had remained her private property and couldn't be taken away. She dressed simply and modestly, adhering to a strict classical style that toned down her natural beauty. She didn't notice men at all, so engrossed was she in psychology. But one day, she fell for a seasoned charmer. Jamie was handsome, ironic, daring, and unpredictable. That's what captivated Eleanor. She fell head over heels in love. When he suggested they go back to his place for a glass of wine, she responded with enthusiasm, knowing full well what would follow. But the boy had a rotten soul. Jamie had made a bet with a posh guy who had tried to court her and been rejected. "Don't even bother," he'd said to his classmate. "I'll get this girl into bed without any fuss." He smirked crudely. "Then you can follow the well-trodden path, understand, mate?" The rich boy scoffed. "Teach me? When you're done with her, I'll fork over 10 grand. And so Jamie tried his very best. Eleanor realized his deception at their very next meeting. Her passionate suitor had become an ice cube. She didn't faint or get upset. She simply chalked up her infatuation with the handsome Jamie to hormones. But the conceited rascal never got his 10 grand. Eleanor drew her own conclusions and kept men at a distance from then on. A coffee and a pastry at a local cafe between classes? Sure. A trip to the cinema with the whole group? Why not? But she cut off any other advances immediately. There were plenty of admirers around, but they were all met with a blunt refusal. The young doctor's troubles did not end after she graduated. She deservedly got a place as a resident at a prestigious psychiatric clinic, where she absorbed every word from her new idol, the head of the rehabilitation department for serious cognitive disorders. He taught the eager resident a lot, entrusting her with complex patients, then helping her get a placement at another prestigious facility. But there, the harassment from the male staff continued. The first harasser was a professionally respected doctor at the clinic. He didn't beat around the bush. He called the young specialist into his office. "We need to have dinner together tonight to discuss your career prospects here. Tell your family you won't be coming home." That's what he said, straight to her face, that her career depended on sleeping with him. She refused him bluntly and without regret. She paid for it soon after. It turned out that before her arrival, the clinic's strictly controlled sedative medications had been accounted for. But with her here, expensive pills started to go missing in handfuls. They didn't even bother to find out whether she was involved or not, quickly showing her the door and threatening her with an investigation, a black mark on her record, and a professional blacklist. The next incident happened at the specialized ambulance service she joined. The teams were focused on responding to calls about violent behavior, such as fights or assaults on family members. Their patients were people on the verge, balancing between being diagnosed as competent or incompetent, living between episodes of mental illness and periods of remission. There were many reasons they weren't isolated from society. Some families paid to get their loved ones out. Others, who were on the borderline, used money and connections to escape being labeled as unwell. Eleanor hadn't known such a service existed in the city. She got the job through another call from her former professor. Her time with the Loonies ended after a month. On that last shift, she was in a team with the head of their department. He sometimes participated in the raids himself, saying he wanted to be entertained. Eleanor was repulsed by his cynicism, but she had no choice. After a fairly calm shift, the boss offered to drive her home. The facility was outside the city. The next bus wasn't for an hour, and everyone was tired after the long night. The young woman accepted, but the boss didn't go to the city. He drove her to a nearby wood. "Don't like ceremony, darling," he breathed at her, his breath reeking of cheap brandy. He wasn't afraid of anything. He'd already drunk half of a small hip flask of brandy in the car. Eleanor wanted to leave the car immediately, but he just laughed. "I can get half the city to sign a sanity certificate when I need one. The police don't scare me." Later, she couldn't explain where she got the strength to slap him hard. His head jerked back, and he looked at her with surprise. "Won't cooperate, eh? Fine. Get out of here, little fish. It's 7 miles through the fields to the city. You can clear your head on the walk. There's no place for a prude in my team. Just ask any of my staff. Now get out." Eleanor didn't ask anyone anything. The next day, she wrote a letter of resignation and was gone. Again, she was without a job or a practice. She stayed home for a month and a half. No clinic wanted to hire her, not even as a nurse. Rumors of her unreliability were spreading throughout the medical world, and everyone interpreted them as they saw fit. Eleanor, a psychotherapist well versed in different forms of aggression, was well aware of harassment as a Western phenomenon, but she had never for a moment thought she would be its victim. She still didn't know how to set up barriers against these disgusting advances that violated her personal space. She would have to think about this in the future. The call from Mr. Barrington a day earlier had interrupted a long string of failures. She wasn't just going to this job, she was going to get it, no matter what it took. She couldn't explain why she was so scared and excited at the same time. She found herself humming, "What will the future hold for me?" in a bass voice, and then singing, "Shall I fall, pierced by an arrow?" She would then burst out laughing to push away the unsettling feelings. The job was unusual. A live-in carer for a young girl with a fatal blood disease and Asperger's syndrome. The syndrome itself was little known to people outside of medicine. Simply put, it meant an inability or lack of desire to communicate with the outside world, living in one's own small world that outsiders were rarely allowed to enter. Society called these people autistic. Her future charge's case was complicated by a severe autoimmune blood disease, where some cells in the body were constantly fighting and destroying other cells. Her patient's condition was currently considered to be of medium severity. A long-term remission was giving her father a chance to spend more time with his beloved daughter. Only God in heaven knew how long the insidious disease would continue to be well-behaved. The doctors simply shrugged their shoulders sympathetically. "Mr. Barrington, we are doing everything we can, but only a miracle can help the girl. We live in a real world with the brutal laws of nature ruling over all living things on the planet." "I've heard all that 1,000 times," the grief-stricken father replied. "What do you recommend to make her life happier if she doesn't react to anything? She's apathetic, inactive, quiet, and silent. I've never even seen her smile. 16 years of constant uncertainty. It's enough to drive a man mad." A renowned specialist in autism spectrum disorders, sitting opposite Mr. Barrington, thought for a few seconds. "I know a doctor," he said, "who has had a rather unlucky career. She can't stay at any clinic for long, and I can't get her to tell me why. She was one of the brightest students on my course, had great potential, and was passionate about helping the less fortunate. She followed all the latest methods and innovations in our field. But in the clinics, she just deflated like a balloon. Unfortunately, I can't personally look after every one of my brilliant students. I helped her out a couple of times, but it didn't work out. I recently ran into her by chance at a bakery, where I was buying a birthday cake for my wife. We exchanged contact information in case I heard of any openings in a clinic under my care. Invite this girl. She was a resident at my hospital. I can vouch for her as I would for myself." Mr. Barrington weighed his options and decided he had nothing to lose. The previous carers hadn't been able to cope with Kira, so perhaps this young woman could. There were many people in his large house. His favorite cook, Gladys, who had worked for him for 30 years, her son Victor, a gardener and handyman, and his housekeeper with the exotic name of Gabriela. There would be a place for the unknown Eleanor as well. 4 guest rooms were empty. He would have to give instructions to Gabby, as he called his housekeeper, in his head. The experiment that would change all their lives had begun. Eleanor decided to start with her appearance. She had to create a new professional image that would hide her natural beauty as much as possible. She didn't want this gift from God, which she considered unnecessary and unearned, to interfere with her work again. From her modest wardrobe, she chose loose trousers, baggy dark skirts, oversized jumpers, and flowing blouses. She also packed low-heeled shoes and boots, and a couple of funny pajamas with cartoon characters on the prints. Eleanor loved elegant lacy and silk underwear, but no one would see that under her loose clothing. Her hair was a bit of a challenge. It refused to be braided into a bun. She completed her look with a pair of neutral-lensed glasses she had bought for a costume party at university. Satisfied with her disguise, Eleanor put her camouflage clothes into a large bag and, with much greater pleasure, went to pack her specialized books. While her patient was resting, she could study all the details of autism again. She decided that treatment should not be started impulsively. Everything needed a calm, reasonable approach. At 8 a.m., just as Mr. Barrington had promised, a smiling young man rang Eleanor's doorbell. "Hello, I'm Simon. Let me take your things to the car. The boss asked me to tell you to check everything carefully so you don't forget anything, as you won't be able to leave for 3 months. Those words made Eleanor feel so warm and calm that she immediately thought, "We'll get along. I'll do everything in my power to make sure of it." The drive to her new home took just over 3 hours without traffic. "The train station is 2 miles from here," Simon said, as if reading her mind. "There are 6 cars in the garage and 2 drivers. You can give me your shopping list, and I'll get it for you." Eleanor looked around with curiosity at the grounds surrounding the magnificent but very pretty, sand-colored house with its original brown decorative elements, balconies, and large terrace. The building was surrounded by a park, and a large outdoor swimming pool, currently covered, was visible in the distance. There were neat paths with clean paving stones, an assortment of coniferous trees, and one of the paths was framed by birch trees. A rose garden was wrapped in a protective cover. On the other side of the house were some outbuildings that looked like small greenhouses. There were boxwood shrubs everywhere, green even in late autumn, and some exotic ones with thick emerald green leaves. A whole crew stood on the porch. "Welcome to our home. I am Eleanor's mother, Martha, but everyone calls me Aunt Marty," said a tall, imposing woman with a shock of bright red hair. "I'm the housekeeper, like Mrs. Hudson from Sherlock Holmes." The woman gave Eleanor a big, kind smile and offered her a large, soft, warm hand. "This is my son, Victor, with the rake. He's a jack of all trades, but his favorite thing is the garden. It's his domain." Aunt Marty continued. "You've already met Simon. The other driver is Peter. All that's left is our housekeeper, Gabriela. Her mother is of Spanish descent, so her name comes from there." Gabriela's large brown eyes stared at Eleanor, and her figure was overly accentuated by her uniform. "Well, I'll be," Eleanor thought, just as a tall, elderly man with a noble appearance appeared on the threshold. She would have called him Your Majesty or Your Grace. He had piercing grey eyes, a short-cropped silver haircut, a regal posture, broad shoulders, and a pleasant, deep voice. "Eleanor, I'm Mr. Barrington. Now Gabriela will show you to your room, give you a tour of the house and grounds, and you can get settled in. Our Martha will give you the meal schedule. In 2 hours, I'll be waiting for you in my study for a chat. If I'm satisfied, I will introduce you to my daughter, Kira." He turned and disappeared into the house. Victor took Eleanor's luggage, and Gabriela made a gesture for her to follow. Only Martha gave her a calming smile. "Lunch is at 2 p.m. The master doesn't tolerate tardiness. We'll get to know each other then. You have more important things to do right now." Eleanor followed Gabriela through the house and barely listened to the housekeeper's quiet murmur. She was very impressed with her own room, which had a separate bathroom and a toilet, huge windows overlooking the garden, and an elegant but cozy atmosphere. She didn't know yet how her life in this house would turn out, but she already wanted to become a part of it. Eleanor's relationship with her foster parents was normal. But either because of the modern age or because their interests were so different, they saw each other very rarely. Their communication was limited to obligatory calls like, "How are you, darling? Everything all right? We're fine too." The conversation usually ended there or moved on to discussing a TV show or gossip about the neighbors. Eleanor felt suffocated by such a boring routine. She would visit them on their birthdays or stop by before Christmas with gifts, but she couldn't talk to them about how lonely and hard her life was in this world. That was out of the question. She was an adult, independent. She just hadn't developed that special closeness with her guardians, where it's all for one and one for all. Her foster parents hadn't understood her choice of profession, but they had approved of her moving out and living on her own. The foster daughter stopped bugging them about wasting time in front of the TV while eating seeds instead of trying to improve their minds. They had different blood and different destinies. But in this big, beautiful house, Eleanor felt in her gut a sense of unity among the household staff. She'd only been here for half an hour, but she already wanted to stay for a long time. Tired of her long monologue, Gabriella led her to Mr. Barrington's study door and said, "Let's just call each other by our first names. I don't like formality. We'll be bumping into each other all day. Don't just walk into the boss's office, though. Knock first. He can't stand being too familiar." Eleanor nodded in agreement, thanking her for the tips. Gabriella left, swaying her hips, and the psychotherapist thought to herself, "That little nymph must be trying so hard for a reason. There must be someone in the house she's trying to attract and conquer. Has she set her sights on the master? Good thing I made sure to look so modest beforehand. The people here won't notice me like they'll notice Gabriella. I have different tasks to do." Eleanor knocked confidently and entered the study after the bosses. "Come in! I'm in here." The study appealed to the inexperienced but very strong theorist at first sight. It had furniture made of noble wood, endless shelves of books, elegant figurines, and excellent landscapes in stylish frames on the walls. There was a desk with a large computer, a music center with speakers in the corner, and a separate cabinet with CDs. She didn't know Mr. Barrington at all, but the study seemed to shout that its owner was no fool. He was well-read, educated, smart, and successful. Mr. Barrington invited her to a soft armchair by a small table, without pointing out her subordinate place in the room by making her sit opposite him at his desk. He rang a bell and called for Gabriella. "Make us a couple of cups of coffee, please. Or would you prefer juice or tea?" Eleanor gratefully accepted the coffee. She had been so nervous that morning that she hadn't eaten breakfast, and she was afraid her treacherous stomach would betray her by rumbling loudly at the most inappropriate moment. She was in luck. Along with the coffee, Gabriella brought a bowl of nut biscuits, a box of chocolates, and a jug of cream. Overwhelmed by nerves, Eleanor attacked the food like a hungry wolf cub, but she saw no judgment in Mr. Barrington's eyes. He loved sincerity and spontaneity in people, and he even smiled. "We're not very good hosts, are we? You've just arrived and we haven't even offered you a cup of tea." Eleanor tried to say everything was fine with her mouth full, then she smiled helplessly, wiped the crumbs from her lips, and chewed the rest of the biscuit carefully. "Please forgive me," she said. "I was a bit nervous, so I just attacked the sweets. Thank you for the coffee. Let's get back to business." Mr. Barrington would never admit to his partners or to the young woman that he had a favorite old-fashioned way of vetting people. He had adopted this approach to hiring from his father, a simple farmer who had spent his whole life tilling the soil and growing crops. His father, to his great sadness, was no longer able to work. 5 years earlier, Mr. Barrington had bought a small cottage in a nearby village, where his parents were living out their days. The older generation had flatly refused to move into his mansion, saying that the land in their garden was more dear and interesting to them than the landscaped park on their son's estate. After hiring a kind housekeeper for them, the son stopped trying to convince them to live with him. Now they just visited each other or gathered for family celebrations, but he had never forgotten his father's rule. You had to feed any potential employee and see how they handled the meal, and only then could you draw conclusions. If a person eats honestly, without any pretense or false modesty, they will be good for something. But if they say they aren't hungry and only take a few crumbs, they will be lazy at work too. Any professional recruiter would die laughing at such a method, but Mr. Barrington had long been convinced that the method worked flawlessly. After handing Gabriella the tray with the empty cups, Eleanor's boss began to talk. "You were recommended to me by the professor, who sometimes consults with my daughter. Before you begin your duties, I would like to briefly tell you our story, not as a stranger, but as a psychotherapist. Kira is a late child for my wife and me. My wife passed away a week after she was born. Her heart couldn't take it. I have an older son, Ethan. He lives and works in Europe, at our branch in Prague, and he only visits now and then. Ethan was born when my wife and I were very young. He is now 33. Our student marriage, which was based on great mutual love, was very strong. We were soulmates, and only one thing saddened my wife. After the birth of a strong, healthy boy, she had a series of miscarriages. My wife dreamed of a second child, a girl. She had even chosen her name in honor of her own mother, to whom she was endlessly devoted. At 44, my wife became pregnant again. She was endlessly happy, but the doctors were horrified. A normal checkup for all mothers-to-be revealed a serious arrhythmia. Her heart could not handle the double load, and she began to have problems with her blood vessels. The doctors were concerned that the baby was not receiving enough nutrients. My wife, who was constantly in the hospital trying to maintain her pregnancy, only looked at me with pleading eyes and begged me not to let them terminate it. "I will be careful, and I will do everything the doctors tell me. I have to carry this baby to term." Her desire was strengthened when the ultrasound showed she was carrying a girl. My wife became completely obsessed with the idea that heaven had finally taken pity on us and was giving us this last chance. My wife bravely endured 9 months of tormenting waiting, an endless series of procedures and injections, and even a C-section. The verdict of the neonatologists was a blow to her. They immediately suspected some abnormalities in the girl. A detailed examination showed that she had inherited an extremely rare genetic blood disease that is passed down the female line. People with it do not live long, 10 to 15 years at most. The news broke my wife. It took a toll on her already sick heart. The arrhythmia attacks returned with a terrible, persistent vengeance. She never returned home from the hospital. Kira was discharged 2 months after meticulous observation. At first, I was heartbroken, and I held a grudge against the child for taking my beloved wife away and leaving me alone in this world. Ethan was 17 at the time, and I'm still amazed that even then he was so wise and mature. He convinced me that everything was predestined, that he had also lost his mother, but it was her life, her dream, and her choice. You won't believe it, but he was the one who, along with the nanny, looked after the baby. He quickly learned how to change nappies and feed her special formula. The second blow was that the doctors soon noticed that Kira was different from other children. Her genetic disease had not yet shown any symptoms, but she drove us crazy because she didn't react to our presence, not at 6 months or a year or even later. Imagine, a child eats, sleeps, but doesn't react to us or to the many colorful toys around her. Her face was like a frozen mask. There were no expressions or gestures. When you would put her down or sit her up, she would stay in that position for a long time. The girl was very pretty, even beautiful. She had large eyes, locks of light hair, and plump hands and feet, but she behaved like a lifeless doll. After some time, she was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, or autism. The doctors assured me that this type of autism spectrum disorder had good prospects. Her body's functions would develop partially, but not fully. I took her to Europe, and the doctors there worked a small miracle. They fixed her sleep schedule and adapted her diet. They taught the girl to react to what was happening around her, at least a little. I returned from Germany feeling almost happy. Kira started to recognize the family. She babbled in an unknown language, and sometimes she tried to express something with gestures. But she still hadn't learned to smile. She would turn her head at loud noises during walks, and she would tuck in her legs when Ethan tried to get her to swim in the Black Sea. A little later, I sent Ethan to study in the UK. Luckily, my business was growing by leaps and bounds, bringing me more and more income, as if to reward me for my troubles. My wife and I had built this house together. It was her idea to live away from the hustle and bustle of the city in a quiet, rural area. The man paused for a moment. It was clear that the story had stirred up old memories. He glanced at his watch. There were only 15 minutes left until lunch. You'll learn the rest as you work. I'll just add the most important thing. The autoimmune disease, like a hungry hydra on the hunt, suddenly raised its head when Kira entered puberty. Everything for her was delayed compared to her peers. So this happened about 2 years ago, when she was 14. The past accomplishments of the doctors quickly evaporated. It seemed that the destruction of her cells was also causing a breakdown of her brain activity. The few dozen words she had learned to say had been forgotten. She was once again apathetic to what was happening around her. The girl who used to enjoy walking with Aunt Marty and even swimming in the pool with Victor's help had forgotten all those skills. More and more often, she wouldn't let us lift her out of bed. Now she only gets around in a wheelchair. She barely eats anything and is losing weight. I understand, Eleanor, that you are not a wizard or a god. The doctors have already told me that the girl has no more than a year left. The destruction in her fragile body is progressing. I have designated your task to be to make her passing to the other side as easy as possible. I know it's impossible, but I still dream of her smiling as she looks at our park, the residents of the house, the sky, and the sun. Perhaps I'm asking too much of you. Eleanor was in shock. No, she would do everything she could to complete the task before her. She would use all her knowledge. There was so much pain and despair in the man's eyes. He had spoken so bravely about his daughter's impending death that the invited psychotherapist's blood ran cold. So this was it, a beautiful house with a high fence, and within its walls, for so many years, disaster had been living comfortably despite the pleasant faces of the people who had built it. Lunch was wonderful. Martha cooked so well that Eleanor didn't even notice she had devoured everything that was offered to her and even reached for a second helping of some very unusual salad. When she asked where Kira was, several people answered at once. Kira has her own lunch in her room, said Mr. Barrington. We'll go and introduce you to her after lunch. I've already made her favorite meatballs and mashed potatoes, my little bird, added Aunt Marty. I picked a bunch of bright purple asters for her from the forest behind the house, said Victor. I think Kira loves them. Only Gabby, whom Mr. Barrington had called by her nickname in his study, focused on eating her food while looking at her plate. It seemed that she was the least concerned about Kira's condition, if she was concerned at all. I'll have to keep an eye on this flirtatious woman, Eleanor thought. She prepared my room perfectly, no complaints there. But is she making any trouble for my patient? When you work with an autistic person, all methods are good, and every little thing can turn out to be important. After those words, everyone at the table was distracted by the delicious pastries and compote, and Eleanor thought to herself, this place is so warm and welcoming. The staff eats at the same table as the master, and everyone is praying for this girl and doing their best to make her life better. Her thoughts were interrupted by Mr. Barrington's voice. Eleanor, are you ready to go to your patient? The woman replied with enthusiasm that that was all she was waiting for, and she was not lying. The curtains in Kira's room were drawn, and a gloomy, hopeless atmosphere prevailed. Eleanor immediately made a mental note that this had to be changed. It was clear that a very sick person lived here, but it wasn't necessary to emphasize it with the decor. The girl didn't react to their arrival. At that moment, Aunt Marty brought in a tray with Eleanor's patient's favorite dishes. The psychotherapist decided not to put off her work. Mr. Barrington, Martha, please allow me to feed Kira myself, and we can get to know each other. Leave us alone. Kira, this is your new Dr. Eleanor. She will be with you almost all the time. You don't mind if we leave you two alone, do you? Again, there was no noticeable reaction. The girl obediently opened her mouth when she saw the food, chewed and swallowed like a puppet, but Eleanor began her monologue anyway. I'm not a doctor or a carer for you, Kira. I prefer the status of being your friend. I'll be with you of my own accord, even if I'm considered an employee. I'll tell you the truth. I would stay with you for free. I love this amazing house, the people, and you. And tomorrow, we'll turn your room upside down. I don't think it will be bad for your health. For a fleeting moment, Eleanor thought something flickered in the girl's eyes, a flash of a reaction. But it all went away very quickly. It could have been the play of light and shadow in the room. The doctor decided to think about it later in her own room. For now, she put some warm clothes on her patient and took her in her wheelchair to the yard so she could breathe in the crisp autumn air. From that moment on, the days in the house followed a long-established routine. In the morning, Eleanor and Kira had breakfast together in the girls' room, followed by the inevitable IVs and injections that fought the effects of her genetic disease. Then, an obligatory 2-hour walk in the garden, where Victor was always working on his plants, followed by lunch in the big hall. At this meal, Eleanor spent time with the house staff, and then she would feed Kira. The patient would then have her healing nap. Then a new dose of medication was administered through the IV for a couple of hours. Dinner was now in the presence of Mr. Barrington, who spent all of his weekdays at work and worked at home in his study in the evenings and on weekends. The patient, exhausted by the endless procedures, would fall into a deep sleep by 10 in the evening. Eleanor, on the other hand, would study the work of her colleagues on the problems of autism over and over again. There was no progress in establishing a closer bond with her patient. Her condition remained stable. Eleanor talked to Kira constantly about everything. She would tell her the plots of her favorite books, read her poetry, and show her reproductions of paintings from a big, colorful album. Actually, talked isn't the right word here. The doctor was just giving a monologue while the girl listened apathetically. One day, the doctor, who was starting to lose hope, found a foreign article that said that interacting with animals could be a good way to help patients with autism. For some reason, there were no pets in Mr. Barrington's house. After a general meeting of all the residents of the mansion, it was decided to get a puppy of a large dog. Everyone liked a little Canadian Newfoundland the most. 2 days later, Simon brought a shaggy black treasure with lively eyes from a kennel that specialized in breeding this very breed. The puppy was irresistible. It is generally believed that our smaller friends have no intelligence. What then told Tim, full name Timothy, not some fancy name like Duke or Lord, that he was destined for Kira? After entering her room, which, on Eleanor's orders, had a more cheerful atmosphere with lots of bright elements, Tim went straight to the girl and nudged her hand with his wet nose, and the doctor was sure of it. Something flashed in Kira's eyes, a lightning-fast reaction, but she had no doubt. It was bright and positive. For the first time, Eleanor felt they were on the right track. For Christmas and New Year, everyone in the house was waiting for Ethan to arrive from Prague. Eleanor had never met the young man, but she remembered Aunt Marty saying, "Our Kira is a treasure. She transforms when her older brother comes to visit. She doesn't smile, but her face just lights up." Gabriella, who was present during their conversation, added, "And our Ethan is so handsome, so respectable, decent, wise, but with the look of a Hollywood heartthrob. 2 images in one person, it's so intriguing." Aunt Marty immediately replied, "Go and change Kira's bed sheets while she's on her walk with Eleanor. All you ever think about is romance? You're chasing the wrong man." Gabby, as usual, wiggled her hips and left. And the cook put her hands on her hips and said to Eleanor, "That girl completely loses her mind when the master's son comes home from Europe. She keeps trying to attract him. But he looks at her like she's nothing. He used to have a fiancée who cheated on him while he was working and making money in the Czech Republic. They broke up, even though the silly girl came here crying and trying to win him back. It didn't help. Ethan no longer trusts her and couldn't forgive her for seeing another man at the same time." Aunt Marty sighed sadly and then unexpectedly suggested, "Come to my room tonight for tea. I'll tell you my story about how Mr. Barrington saved me from misfortune and why I've called him a goodness angel ever since." On their walk, Eleanor discussed raising the new family member with Victor. It was not right for a purebred dog to just hang around the yard. The gardener had once said that a dog was his long-time dream. He patiently put up with all of Tim's mischief and even forgave him for running into a bush that was wrapped in a protective cover. It seemed to Eleanor that Kira, sitting in her wheelchair, made a movement towards the naughty Newfoundland, but she was in no hurry to voice her thoughts. She would have to watch and watch again. After dinner, and making sure Kira was in a deep, peaceful sleep, Eleanor went to the neighboring room and knocked. "Come in, I've been waiting," the red-haired Martha's voice called out. "I've brewed some lemon balm tea, and I have gooseberry jam with nuts. We're going to have a feast." Eleanor had been to the cook's room briefly before, but now she had a chance to look at it in detail. It had the same elegance and homey comfort, but with Aunt Marty's personal belongings, which were very dear to her. On the wall were many framed photos. Mr. Barrington and his wife when they were young, Kira in different poses, Victor in the garden, and a handsome young man on a horse. "That's our Ethan. He's handsome," she said. "And God bless him with happiness. Like his father, he's all business. It's time for him to have his own children, but he's always flying all over the world. I know he's not a monk, but those flighty girls he dates are not what he needs for marriage. He would be a wonderful father. He loves Kira so much." Aunt Marty ate another spoonful of the translucent amber-green gooseberry jam and began her story. 35 years ago, after I finished high school, I became a culinary technician. I graduated from university in Kharkov, not some culinary school. I dreamed of a career as a head chef, a chef who would get a Michelin star for my art. It didn't work out. It was all because of my clumsy appearance, 6'2", size 9 feet, and overweight. I had bright copper-colored hair, clumsy movements, and no taste in clothes. Of course, chefs aren't chosen based on their clothing, but the human resources representatives at all the cafes and restaurants where I tried to get a job after graduation refused me for some plausible reason. At one prestigious restaurant, the woman in human resources was honest. Our customers often ask the chef to come out to the dining room if they like their dish. "You can't be the face of our restaurant. You're only good enough for a circus cafe." I'm telling you this bluntly because I prefer being honest with the people I hire rather than looking away in shame. Well, my suffering ended one day when I was hired by a private cafe called Queen Tamar with authentic Georgian cuisine. The owner was a short, bald Georgian with crooked fingers and legs. He temporarily shattered my belief that Caucasian men were always handsome. This philanderer said without mincing words, "My wife is sick and can't sleep with me. I'm a man, I have to take care of my needs. You will work in the kitchen and visit me a couple of times a week. If you do well, I'll make you the senior chef, and then maybe even the head chef." At first, I was so shocked I couldn't speak. I told him I would think about it. Then I thought about it. I had spent 6 years in a part-time program and 2 years as a kitchen assistant in a canteen. I was about to turn 26, and I was still single. No one was beating down my door. No one had ever looked at me with that seductive look full of desire. Never. I told him I agreed to all his conditions. The owner of Queen Tamar squinted at me from under his brow and led me to the back room. That's where I learned about love. It happened between crates of vegetables, herbs, and boxes of vodka that were later served in carafes as cha-cha. It was annoying and frustrating, but whatever. That quick physical love affair between the boss and me lasted for a year and a half. Then I got pregnant. When he heard the news, my lover didn't mince words. He fired me on the spot. He kept complaining that his wife couldn't find out anything. He had 3 grown children, and his family would laugh at him if they found out who he had been with. He paid me 3 months' salary in advance and washed his hands of me. I hadn't told him about the baby right away. I kept putting it off, because I had a feeling the news would not go over well. Because of my weight, my belly only started to show when I was 6 or 7 months pregnant, just before my maternity leave. And then I was out on the street. The money for my rented flat ran out 2 weeks before Victor was born. The only family I had was an aunt in a distant village. I don't even know what our relationship was. I'd never seen my father, and my mother had become a homeless alcoholic when I was 20, then disappeared without a trace. But I never doubted for a second that I would have this baby. I was all alone in this world, and now I would have my own flesh and blood. My landlady wasn't very kind, but she took pity on me. She waited until I gave birth and was discharged from the hospital, and gave me another month for free. But then her children came to live with her, and she showed me the door. We spent a week in a seedy hotel, but the boy was fussy, and the soundproofing was terrible, so the other guests complained that we weren't letting them sleep. We had to leave with nowhere to go. I was sitting at a bus stop with my belongings and a month-old baby. I decided to go somewhere far away in the countryside. Maybe I would find an abandoned house. I had only a week's worth of money in my purse when an expensive dark SUV stopped near the bus stop. I was crying so hard that I didn't even understand what the driver was asking me. It was Mr. Barrington, who was building a house in the area and was looking for a local hardware store that had recently been built on the highway. I gave him the address. Why not? He didn't drive off right away. He later told me that my eyes looked like a beaten dog's, and they held so much desperation that he had to ask me Why are you sitting in the wind with the baby? Can I take you somewhere, even if it's in a completely different direction? I don't know how it happened, but I told him my whole story. He scoffed, thought about it for a couple of minutes, and then asked, "You say you're a professional cook? I'm looking for a specialist like that. I need to feed 2 teams of workers every day. We can give you a warm trailer to live in." I didn't hesitate for a second. It was getting dark. The bus was delayed. I might have had to spend the night in a field with Victor. I gathered my things and got into the warm car. I wasn't afraid at all. I was used to working, and I loved my craft. I thought, the gods don't bake the pottery after all. Martha paused her long story and poured them another cup of fragrant tea. She brought a plate of warm pastries from the kitchen. She looked at Eleanor briefly. "I haven't tired you out with my stories, have I, Doctor?" "No, Aunt Marty, you haven't. It's rare for anyone to speak to me so candidly and trust me with their secrets. I'm so grateful for your openness." "Then I'll continue," the woman said. "From then on, everything was much nicer. The workers treated me like a mother. They were tired of their dry food, and I immediately made them a hearty borscht with bone broth, fried some meatballs, and cooked some millet porridge in a cast-iron pot with butter. When they brought out the compote, the foreman couldn't help but say, 'Gladys, you cook wonderfully. We haven't had such a feast around here in a long time. Guys, I'll give you your orders. It's hard to feed such a crowd without a proper kitchen. So we'll set up a daily roster. Some of you will help her with the firewood for the stove, some with hauling water, and with other heavy work. She has a baby in her arms and has to feed him too. So have some decency, fellas, and don't take advantage of this young woman.' That's how I ended up in this yard almost 30 years ago, when only the foundation was being built. My darling Victor grew up here. After the construction was finished, I stayed on with the owners. Mr. Barrington and his wife had little Ethan back then. Oh, what a feast I prepared for their housewarming party. The guests were amazed and kept asking where he found such a cook. All kinds of important people with connections came to the house, and many of them tried to entice me to work for them. But how could I betray him? The goodness angel came to me from heaven one autumn evening at a bus stop. I could never betray him just because others offered me more. Kira was born here. I was her nanny and carer, and Mr. Barrington appointed me as the housekeeper, giving me a promotion. Everyone here is family to me. Even that silly Gabriella with her dreams of getting Mr. Barrington doesn't seem like an enemy to me. There you have it, Eleanor, my story. Maybe it will help you and give you some clues in your work." Eleanor went back to her room, deep in thought. Before, she had believed that the rich were not kind. In Mr. Barrington's house, she had seen a different world, full of warmth, respect, and a desire to help each other in difficult situations. Her strong desire to do everything possible to make Kira's life a little easier was strengthened even more. The next day, she increased the therapeutic load for the girl and insisted that the massage procedures be brought back, deciding that they would not harm a body that was broken by disease but would instead help improve its muscle tone. Kira still did not react to the changes in her routine, but the presence of the shaggy puppy, Timothy, seemed to brighten her face a little. Eleanor didn't give up. She took the wheelchair with the patient through the park and had Kira watch Victor work with the dog. The gardener had taken his task very seriously. The little Tim already knew the commands sit, lie down, stay, and come. In the house, the Newfoundland recognized only 2 people as his owners: Kira, at whose feet he spent all his free time, and Victor, who fed him and trained him. The days flew by, and the favorite winter holidays, Christmas and New Year's Eve, were approaching. Eleanor, Gabby, and Martha joyfully decorated the already charming house with pine boughs, colorful wreaths, and sculptures of fairy tale characters. Victor set up artificial Christmas trees in all the rooms, decorating them with expensive ornaments. Everyone was in a festive mood. 3 days before Christmas, Eleanor was surprised to receive a call from her only close friend, Susie. "Eleanor, you're going to fall down. I have huge news. I'm getting married in a hurry and moving to the Far East with my fiancé. He's a military engineer and will be living near the Vostochny Cosmodrome." Eleanor immediately became sad. She and Susie had been like sisters, always supporting each other since they were young, and now they were going to be separated. Meanwhile, her friend continued to chatter on the phone. "I'm having a farewell hen party on the 30th of December in a nightclub. Our flight is on the 2nd of January. No excuses, Eleanor. I've made you a farewell gift. I sewed you a ball gown that will take your breath away. It's not worthy of your beauty, but it will enhance it perfectly. Eleanor thought, if Susie could see me now, she would die laughing. The carer had recently overheard Gabby talking about her. The housekeeper had looked at her with contempt after dinner and said, "Our psychotherapist is a pale grey mouse. How can the earth bear such shapeless, faceless women? They're useless. Men must avoid such a scarecrow like the plague." Eleanor promised Susie she would call back that night and went to Kira's room. The girl, after a large dinner and a walk, was already fast asleep on her soft pillows. Eleanor fixed her blanket and slipped into the corridor. She had to talk to Mr. Barrington, and she knew it wouldn't be easy. But when she knocked shyly on his study door, he answered immediately. "Come in, I've just finished my evening paperwork. Is something wrong?" "I have some unexpected circumstances," she said, quickly explaining the situation. "But I will accept any decision you make. The thing is, a person close to me is leaving for a distant land, and we won't have another chance to see each other if I can't go to this meeting my friend has planned. I'm not a warden in a prison, Eleanor, and this isn't a jail. You've been in this house for a month and a half without leaving. Kira is doing, if not brilliantly, then without any signs of getting worse. I'm happy with your initiatives and practical experiments. Not a single one of them has harmed my sick daughter. You must go to the city. I'm giving you 24 hours. You must be back by 8 in the evening on the 31st of December. Eleanor didn't walk out of his office. She flew out on wings. Aunt Marty was busy in the kitchen, and the newly freed carer had to share her news. "Even if I am a scarecrow," Eleanor chattered, "everyone wants a piece of the holiday spirit. Besides, when else will I see my Susie again?" "You, a scarecrow," the cook replied with a smile. "Save your fairy tales for others, my dear. I'm an old, shrewd woman who's been around the block, and your disguise doesn't fool me. I've known for a long time that you hide your beauty under that drab look and those glasses. Don't you worry, that secret stays between us. Since you're doing this, you must have good reasons. Your profession is not harmed by these disguises, and I am not bothered." Eleanor ran back to the kitchen, hugged the master of culinary arts warmly and tenderly, and said, "I know two goodness angels in this house. Aunt Marty, your kindness and willingness to understand and accept are no less than the master's mercy." She kissed Aunt Marty's plump cheek, which smelled of vanilla and apples, and hurried to call Susie with the good news. Since Susie was a dressmaker, the dress for Eleanor turned out to be magnificent. It was a soft, form-fitting, dark blue silk that highlighted every curve of her graceful figure without forgetting about all the necessary feminine curves. The neckline and the slit in the leg were perfect. The pearl necklace, bracelets, and earrings her foster parents had given her for her 25th birthday matched the outfit perfectly. Susie, who had just helped her friend into the dress in one of the dressing rooms in her studio, froze in admiration. "Eleanor, you will be the goddess of the night. I'm sure your fiancé will be unbothered. He's seen you in our photos, but all the other men will be at your feet. You'll see." "I'd prefer to stay away from all that annoying male attention," Eleanor replied with bitterness. "I've had enough sad experiences in that area. I feel like decent men, if not knights, then at least normal chaps, are all gone from this world. I've only met ones who managed to disappoint me. I'll go back to my flat to do my hair and nails and so on. I'll see you at the club tonight." The place, called City Lights, greeted Eleanor with a stunningly colorful display. Decorated Christmas trees, colorful lights, and sparkling tinsel. The people were dressed to the nines. Her beloved friend Susie was wrong. On the dance floor, at the tables, and at the bar, there were many beautiful women worthy of being the stars of the night. It seemed everyone had tried to look their best. The crowd was already relaxed after a few drinks. Eleanor breathed a sigh of relief. No one was paying her any attention, but she rejoiced too soon. At one of the tables, a very drunk Jamie was entertaining his friends. When he saw a relaxed Eleanor chatting with Susie and the other girls, a greedy gleam appeared in his eyes. "That girl has become even more beautiful. I was a fool to let that bird out of her love cage. A woman like that would improve any man's image," he thought, smirking. "I'll get her into bed again tonight." He decided to let her have at least one cocktail so she would become more agreeable. Jamie went back to his company but kept his eyes on Eleanor. About an hour later, Jamie's patience ran out. He decided to go and teach his defiant girl a lesson by humiliating her in front of her friends. He appeared behind Eleanor with a banal greeting. "Look who it is, all alone without a bodyguard. Want me to look after your gorgeous body, darling, from other admirers?" Eleanor recoiled from Jamie in surprise, but she didn't want to ruin Susie's wonderful night. So she quickly got up from the table and led Jamie to the bar. "What do you want? We settled everything a long time ago. Go back to your friends and leave me alone." But it wasn't so easy to stop the handsome boor. He had no intention of giving up on his plan to sleep with such a charming woman again. "Don't be a fool, Eleanor. Let's have a glass of good red wine for this unexpected meeting and part as friends. I didn't mean to upset you. I just thought you might have some good memories from our short romance." The woman decided not to cause a scene and obediently followed the man to his table. Jamie ordered 2 glasses of expensive wine and paid for some chocolates and sugary nuts. He put his arm around Eleanor's waist possessively. His plan was simple. His old acquaintance would get tipsy and become more compliant. But he was wrong. Eleanor downed her glass of wine in one gulp, not even tasting it, and looked her former lover in the eyes. "Now I'm free of you. The ritual is complete." Jamie was not used to such behavior from women. No one had ever refused him. So he whispered in her ear, "This is not the end of our New Year's Eve date, my dear. Don't even hope. I'll go and get a private room, and you will be tender with me." "I remember everything, my charmer." "Here we go again," Eleanor thought with frustration. "Why is it that every man who comes near me only wants one thing?" She looked around helplessly. There was no one nearby except for a young man calmly drinking whiskey at the bar. Their eyes met and she didn't know what the stranger read in her eyes, but he calmly got off his stool and walked over to them. "This woman is with me. I was only gone for a minute. And you've already taken advantage of my absence." Jamie's eyes widened in surprise. "And who are you, big boy? Where did you come from?" Eleanor later remembered the rest of the night as a nightmare. The man who came to her rescue lifted Jamie off the ground like a feather and gave him a good slap. The drunk man, who had a bad temper, didn't give up. Before leaving the battlefield, he grabbed his glass of red wine and splashed the bright liquid all over Eleanor's dress. A large burgundy stain instantly appeared. The woman turned pale. Her unexpected knight grabbed her hand and led her to the toilets. On the way, he told her that she needed to quickly wash the fabric so there would be no stains left. Eleanor was worried about something else entirely. No one had ever stood up for her in her entire life. Suddenly, in a fit of emotion, she hugged the man by his neck and dragged him to the club's exit. She paused for a minute at the cloakroom to get her coat. "I have my car," her stunned savior murmured on the way. "I have a meeting with an old friend here, but he's running late." But Eleanor wasn't listening. She was in a daze, pulling him along the cold autumn street to a taxi that had just dropped off passengers. She didn't care about propriety, her ruined outfit, or the fact that her companion was obediently following her. Only one thought hammered in her head. "It's a good thing I wear expensive silk underwear. I won't be embarrassed." In her flat, where she had brought her accidental knight from the club, she pounced on him like a tigress, like a starving predator, like a cat in heat, and he didn't resist. Everything that happened between them was like being in the Garden of Eden. Her body sang, her soul rejoiced, and her thoughts danced a can-can. "I'm so tired of being well-behaved and decent. Even if this is just for one night, I don't even know his name. But my accidental lover is obviously handsome and not stupid." She was sure of the latter, even though they hadn't said a word to each other. Towards morning, they fell asleep, still embracing. But Eleanor woke up alone. Besides the rumpled sheets and the pillow that still smelled of his amazing male cologne, there was nothing in her flat to remind her of the night before. She made some coffee and took her savings from a shoebox to buy Christmas presents for everyone in Mr. Barrington's house. She had come to consider all of these people family. As for the night, well, what could she do? All Christmas magic eventually comes to an end. Santa Claus, who had saved her from the vile Jamie, had disappeared. It was a shame she hadn't even made breakfast for the stranger. Her fridge was empty, and there wasn't a single slice of bread. But she knew how to make amazing pancakes. There was flour, sugar, vanilla, and milk in the freezer, and a block of frozen butter. But she had to get back to her duties. Eleanor put on her mask of a plain Jane, packed her bag, and called Simon. Mr. Barrington's driver promised to take her shopping for gifts and get her back to the estate on time. Eleanor suddenly thought that the man she had spent that magical night with was also an angel of goodness and protection, at least for her. She had mixed feelings, sadness from the separation and of something that was not to be, but also joy that such a fireworks display had happened in her rather bland life. Eleanor and Simon arrived at Mr. Barrington's house at exactly 8 p.m., like clockwork. On the doorstep, Eleanor was stopped by Victor and Tim. The gardener shyly gave her a bouquet made of pine cones and sparkling tinsel ribbons. Gabriella appeared on the porch, looking as if she had been decorated for the new year with all the colors of the rainbow: colored mascara, eyeliner, eyeshadow, blush, and lipstick. Strangely, it didn't ruin her natural beauty. "What's this, Victor? Are you paying attention to others? You said you loved me forever. Did your feelings wither, and now you've moved on to our doctor?" The modest and usually quiet gardener suddenly stood up to her. "I haven't even had a chance to give you my humble gift yet, and don't you dare talk to Eleanor disrespectfully. You're not even worthy to clean her shoes." Gabriella gave Victor a contemptuous look and said, "Shut up, you garden and field scarecrow. I'm waiting for Mr. Ethan. That's a real man. Learn from him how a real man looks and acts." To interrupt the unpleasant exchange, Eleanor took Victor's arm and led him aside. "Don't listen to her nasty words, Victor. A man who knows how to love plants and animals is like an extension of them on this earth. Some of us become angels of goodness for other people, healing and saving lost, unhappy souls. And some become shepherds and guides for flora and fauna, protecting them from human cruelty and using them for the good of people. You are one of those goodness angels for Mother Nature. Be proud of such an exclusive status. You have earned it." Eleanor kissed a bewildered Victor on the cheek and went up the stairs. She heard the sound of an approaching car, but she was already running to her patient. Soon everyone would be celebrating the new year, and Kira was not yet ready. Aunt Marty was also busy with the table. In the beautifully decorated hall, everything sparkled and shone. The table was laden with food and drinks. All the household members were in their festive clothes. Eleanor had even changed out of her shapeless jumper and into a white blouse with lace and a black skirt. Only the bun on her head and the glasses on her nose remained. Mr. Barrington came to the table in a soft cashmere pullover and loose light trousers. Small gold tinsel bows were pinned to Aunt Marty's hair and apron. Gabriella was in a provocative purple dress with a deep neckline and a low back. She served the food in her dress. Kira was sitting quite upright in her wheelchair in a beautiful violet dress. Eleanor had done her hair for her. The girl looked refreshed. At her feet, as usual, lay her faithful guard, Timothy. For the holiday, Victor had specially washed him with dog shampoo. His coat was gleaming. Eleanor had already given everyone their presents, little Christmas tree ornaments with angels in different outfits. If you shook them a little, they made a melodic ringing sound. Everyone began sitting at the table at 10 p.m. They had to say goodbye to the old year, thank it for all the good things, and ask it to take all the bad things with it. Mr. Barrington went out to hurry his son, and soon they appeared together in the hall. Eleanor was just taking a sip of orange juice when the man she had spent the night with appeared before her and Kira. She even caught the end of his sentence. "Sorry, Dad, I got held up by unexpected circumstances, and I had to reschedule an important business meeting that didn't happen yesterday." Eleanor choked, blinked her eyes in shock, and then, in front of everyone, a miracle happened. Kira became animated. She reached out to her brother and then made a gesture towards the floor and said indistinctly, "Tim!" Everyone was speechless. They rushed to hug the girl. Eleanor, in the midst of the general commotion, quietly slipped away from the table. Let the family be together without her. No one would even notice she was gone. She needed to calm down after the shocking discovery. The man of her dreams, her mysterious night guest, and Mr. Barrington's son were the same person. She was shaking with confusion. At the table, they soon noticed that Kira's carer, the doctor who had brought about this happy event, was missing. They sent Ethan to look for her. He knocked on the doctor's door, then opened it slightly, but found nothing but the sound of running water from the bathroom. He decided that she might be ill, and he resolutely pushed the bathroom door open. Eleanor was bent over the bathtub, frantically scrubbing some fabric and shedding tears into the water. She turned around at the sound of the opening door. She wasn't wearing the awful glasses, and her hair was down, and Ethan saw something very familiar in her. Then his eyes went to the bathtub where a beautiful dark blue silk dress was soaking. The puzzle was complete. "You?" Ethan cried out in surprise. "I went back to your flat with champagne, food, and a bouquet of flowers, but it was empty. I almost went crazy with despair. I thought I had lost my night fairy forever." Eleanor bravely stepped into his open arms. To hell with all principles, propriety, and rules. This man had turned her soul upside down last night. People get to know each other in different ways in this world. She felt good with him, and nothing else mattered. Ethan was the first to let go of the girl. "Quick, put something on. There are only 5 minutes left until midnight. We'll make it." There was no time for her usual disguise. Eleanor's blouse and skirt were wet. In a matter of seconds, she put on her tight jeans and a large white jumper. She didn't tie up her hair, only briefly touching her thick mane with a brush. They made it to the table with the chimes of midnight. Champagne bubbles were dancing in their glasses, and everyone was waiting for Aunt Marty's culinary creations. Even Kira was trying to form something resembling a smile on her face. Mr. Barrington didn't ask a single question. He just watched as the young people sat down next to each other at the table. Martha thought to herself, with this turn of events, there will soon be children's voices in this house again. Victor smiled happily as he patted Tim's back. Gabriella nervously bit her lips and chewed on a salmon sandwich. "Now they'll take Victor away from me too if I'm not careful," she thought. "Now, to stay in this house and strengthen my position here, I'll have to accept the gardener's advances. He's not a bad guy, he's kind, handy, and quite handsome." The New Year's Eve was truly magical and wonderful, just as it was supposed to be. Everyone at the table was happy in their own way. The long-awaited winter holidays flew by in a whirl of fun and rest, but Eleanor worked tirelessly with Kira to solidify her progress. On the first workday, Mr. Barrington realized that he had been too relaxed during the holidays and decided to come home early. He quietly walked on the soft carpet and approached his daughter's room. He witnessed Kira's new victories. Newfoundland, Tim, Papa, Ethan, Martha, Victor, Gabriella, Eleanor. Kira was repeating the names obediently, syllable by syllable, after Eleanor. Mr. Barrington went around the corner and cried. The medical board, appointed by Eleanor's former professor, delivered an encouraging verdict 10 days later. The disease had retreated, and the process of cell and tissue destruction had slowed down. The period of remission had already exceeded all known limits. "Mr. Barrington, I told you, Eleanor is an excellent specialist. In your case, hoping for a full recovery is like living in the clouds, but there have been noticeable positive changes in your daughter's overall condition. She has started to react to the outside world, albeit weakly. She is starting to talk again. I was thinking, if a patient lives surrounded by goodness angels, as my student called them, they have every chance of staying on this earth for a while longer, and I'm sure you will make her as happy as possible." 6 months later, the morning flight to Prague was delayed due to bad weather. A charming young couple kept looking at the departures board and at each other. "Ethan, what if I hadn't gone to that terrible nightclub? Would you have seen me as a monster and paid no attention to me?" The future mother, with her noticeably rounded belly, asked. "Stop it," the man replied, adjusting the wedding ring on his finger. "I would have seen your angelic soul and your ability to do good through all your disguises. I would have been drawn to that radiant magic." The monotonous voice of the announcer announced that their flight was now boarding. The couple hugged and slowly walked to the gate. "We'll finish all my business in Prague, and you can see the beautiful city. Then we'll hurry home to our family." Before we left, Kira told me, "Ethan, Eleanor, Kira, and Tim are waiting. It's a riddle. We can't let them down. Without us, the circle of angels of goodness would not be complete."